Welcome back to the already 30th episode of the Odyssey podcast. Today we are joined by Ivo Betke, who is the CEO of Molecule. Ivo, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Nice to be here.
Great having you on. Maybe to start, because it seems a little bit like DeSci has been almost been forgotten. It's not getting a lot of mindshare in the broader sphere of crypto Twitter and the crypto bubble. What is DeSci? Why is it needed? And most of all, why does it need crypto and blockchain?
Yes, of course. So first of all, for completeness, I'm the Chief Operating Officer. Paul Kohlhaas is obviously our founder. Why does it need blockchain in science? If you look fundamentally at the biotech and life science space, it's very locked up. It's very slow. Scientists sometimes need months and years to get funded. We basically see a lot of potential to kind of like put this onto new rails and help them to generate funding, to have direct contact with the patient communities, and that helps hopefully a lot. I'm having quite an echo on the sound, so I'm hearing myself all the
time. Are you wearing headphones or?
I do, yeah. Is this better? I don't know.
Let me just see if I can. I'll just mute myself while you're talking. That should work.
Yeah, that should work. Perfect. Yeah. So as I said, it's very difficult. The funding market is very complicated. I mean, Donald Trump, pushed the closure of the NIH in the US, which is kind of like the fundamental funding body for biotech research in the United States. A lot of scientists currently don't even know how to get their projects funded any further from here on out. Hence, I think we're at the perfect point in time, basically, to push DeSci. Yeah.
It's interesting because intuitively it seems like a world in the polar opposite direction to what crypto embodies. It's a very fast-paced industry with like a lot of economically geared incentives and financial games, whereas science is a very lengthy process. And I guess if you look at the life cycle of any medical study or medicine being developed, that usually outpaces the entire existence of crypto as an industry. So I think you're having quite a lift to ship that kind of you merge these communities with another. So maybe to take it over to Molecule, what role is Molecule playing in DeSci? I think right now, from a normie crypto perspective, you guys are pretty much at the forefront of DeSci. So how did that lead develop? How did the idea come about?
So obviously, when Paul started the company about 5 years ago, he was very driven by the idea of like citizen-led science, really opening up the development of supplements of medicine to the citizens themselves, right? So basically, don't have big pharma decide on what drugs get developed and what research is being done and whatnot, and hence the idea of creating DAOs around particular research topics in order to fund and drive scientific research into fields that is like fundamentally underfunded. And Molecule here is really the protocol layer, right? When we onboard and work with a lot of scientists that start from a hypothesis that they can already create and mint on our protocol as a proof of invention. And from there, take them forward into IP NFTs and IPTs, so like the tokenizing the IP NFT to get their intended research funded, and then fundamentally, take that forward through the milestones in traditional scientific research. And here you're totally right. Yeah, there's a lot of translation and hand-holding on both sides necessary from our end, where we work with the scientists, which are used to okay, I get funded and then I go back to the lab for like 6 months, a year, and all I'm focusing on is my lab reports. And then obviously the crypto community that kind of like moves in, and funds the project. But then they're not ready to wait for 6 or 12 months for market signals on how that research IPT is going to develop. So here we have to do a lot of translational work and make sure that both sides kind of like develop an understanding for the other party involved. Yeah.
Can you dive a little deeper into the life cycle of a project that wants to work together or launch via molecule? Like, how does the funding process work? Because I remember in the past month, I think it was end of last year, when DeSci had its little mini 2-week season. I think there was this pump.science launchpad on Solana with like Euro and Riff. Actually, these were my highest multiple investments this entire cycle. So yeah, shout out to whoever launched that. Unfortunately, I didn't go into it with any size at all. So yeah, the absolute profits were rather muted. But yeah, like what does the life cycle look like? And because of the criticism that DeSci faced, is it connected to any goals, to any achievements for the funds to be unlocked? Because like, for example, with Euro and this Riff coin, like, I do not know what the state of the project is right now. Is it like living on? What are the next steps there, and how do you kind of unite the incentives there?
Yeah. So, I mean, Pump Science was started by Benji and Jillian, two of our team members, as a venture idea, basically. So they are really, if you want to do a deep dive on Pump Science, you should really talk to them, because they can tell them a much more original story than I can, because I only joined while Pump Science was already on the way up. But yes, you did right. It was in December when Cizi and Vitalik were in the same room with our founder, Paul, and basically said that they see a lot of potential in DeSci. And that basically got all our open projects funded within minutes, right? And then also helped for Pump Science to take over their initial 2 compounds that they were testing. And I mean, what Pump Science really is kind of like, a lab environment, right? I mean, Pump Science the intention is to allow any user to submit compounds that they want to test against longevity, right? And then we take these compounds through 3 different stages of tests, so flies, worms, and mice, and basically see what the impact is on the life expectancy of the given test group. And yeah, we're utilizing here a lab capacity that exists anyways, right? But so far, no, like regular user was ever able to submit such a test or even pay for it. And that's really what we do here, that we open up the floor to anyone on the planet, right, to submit a compound on Pump Science and get it tested for longevity. And a lot of things haven't been tested, right? I mean, I think it was last week that we launched LSD among a few other compounds, which is super interesting, because there is a lot of indication that might be actually life extending, but no one has ever put that into a lab test. And so it's very exciting for us that we are on the forefront on doing that. Yeah.
Are there any projects that have found their way into more mainstream medicine or adoption, or to like integrating any of these compounds into supplements or any type of treatment therapy so far?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the biggest example here is really HairDAO, right, which developed a prescription drug that is readily available on the market. So you can already get that today in the US, which has proven to be very effective against hair loss. And I mean, the amazing story here is that HairDAO developed this drug in a fraction of the time spent that would usually take, and also at a fraction of the costs. And that is pretty much down to the fact that they basically, around the HairDAO token, we're able to create a community of users, right, and patients that are personally affected by hair loss, and therefore, like are happily basically making themselves available to chip in on the research and kind of like screen all the information that is available in terms of research, and then help to develop a new product that then gets onto the market, right? And there's a few more examples also for, if you look at ValleyDAO from and their IPT Hempi, where they found an enzyme together with a research institute in Austria that helps to soften hemp fiber that's now being introduced to the textile industry. And then also, I think there's a couple of other interesting examples like Perceptor, that already have a supplement on the market that you can use. And I mean, Pump Science was also, or is also looking into, like launching supplements based on the lab tests that are being generated on their platform.
It's pretty cool to see that people can kind of allocate capital based on their actual needs of medicine. For example, I mean, I'm not super deep into the whole biotech and pharmaceuticals space, but I've heard a lot of times that there are tons of medications where it would help a tremendous amount of people, but which are just not very economically attractive for large pharmaceuticals to work on. And given that many of the like OG crypto wealthy people are very interested in science and these related fields, I mean, that could of course be a productive outlet for their capital. I mean, it creates the risk of becoming overly reliant on these very few select actors. And for example, if you look at drugs that would help, I don't know, some water contamination disease in Africa, and maybe it would help 100 million people there, but the like average net worth of these people in Africa is $1. I mean, yeah, you'll not be able to fund this by the people themselves who need it, but you still rely on some external funding there. Maybe to dive a little deeper into the economics behind it. So when you buy a token that is related, let's say, for example, the Vita DAO or the Hair DAO, how do the money flows, how do the economic flows work? How does the money get allocated into these projects? Is there like a part of the total supply that is owned by a treasury, which is used to fund the research, or how does the money flow there?
Exactly. I mean, in an ideal world, I wouldn't say that we're fully there yet, but in an ideal world, obviously, with the initial launch of an IPT and the value creation of that research that is being generated, obviously the value of the IPT goes up. And therefore, the treasury, of the DAO or the IPT project basically funds the further research. That would be the optimal outcome, I would say. Similar to like a digital asset treasury company, that basically lives off their own treasury because it continuously increases in value based on the research that is being generated. But obviously, we also have to be honest here that a lot of research, like in the startup world as well, ends up in nowhere, right? Like, I mean, a scientist has a hypothesis, and that hypothesis might turn out to be wrong, right? And then he has to start over and find a new one until they eventually come up with something that truly works. But I think that's particularly exciting and why we also feel so close to DeFi, because in the current like biotech logic, all this like initial research that is being created that does not lead anywhere is being absorbed into intellectual property that can't be used by anyone else, right? Because it gets locked up in IP because someone paid for it, and then it sits somewhere at a university or in a biotech company, and no one ever looks at it again because it wasn't valuable for their course, but eventually it might have been valuable for someone else, right? And that's where we hope with the molecule protocol to eventually, achieve a level of composability where then you can start to be, for example, just a data provider on a hypothesis that didn't work out, right? Or on lab data, or on patient trials, or on, wet lab tests and or like computational biotech and so on, and really make, like the different pieces of a drug development path basically composable and accessible to the wider community.
If you hold a token and let's say, for example, the Hair DAO launched the like hair treatment medicine against hair loss, are you also legally entitled to any profits downstream of that medicine? And how does that work from a regulatory perspective? Because pharmaceuticals are arguably not the regulatory easiest field to work in. And now if you combine that with an already like gray zone regulated industry like crypto, where you have a lot of regulation by enforcement and very unclear guidelines, and you're even doing that across geographies, I guess that's kind of complicated. So how do you tackle that?
Yeah. I mean, at the moment, like as there is commercial success, you know, that commercial revenue usually flows back into the treasury of the DAO, right, or the owner of the IP and NFT in that case, which is often or regularly a DAO that has launched a project, could be also a biotech company, you know, in the future, or a university. There is at the moment no clear path to commercial rights to all of this. This is something that we're working on to find a reasonable implementation of real-world assets strategy, basically into the IPTs. And there is a model that we have recently introduced in our blog that we believe, you know, could be the right path. But indeed, as you said, you know, you have to kind of like make geographical differentiation, right? So we have to build one model that works in the US, and then we have to build another model that works within the European Union with MiCA and so on and so forth, right? So we have to really see and adjust that to local circumstances, basically.
So far, have there been any practices or any things you were not able to do versus a traditional pharma company, from either like an access to regulatory vehicles, access to laboratories, or whatever? Like, can you outline specific fields where a decentralized approach like Molecule has advantages versus traditional pharma companies and their research and development process?
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest advantage lies in the communities, right? As we said, there's a lot of, you know, people that, you know, are personally affected or have someone in the family that has a certain illness, and that they want to see a certain scientific space to be like researched better. And that's, you know, like a force that is very, very difficult to stop. And we're basically providing the environment to actually turn this into effective research, right, through the governance. And I mean, this is what effectively works today, you know, that a DAO can, or like scientists could propose scientific research to any of the DAOs, right? And then they would vote on that. And based on your token holdings, you obviously have governance, so you can participate in the direction of the research. You know, that is obviously a much more direct feedback loop than any pharma company would ever have, right? Because I mean, they work with focus groups as well, but they obviously don't get the fast response that we get within the DAOs.
Having talked a little bit about the flows and mechanisms behind it, so I saw that there are two entities or two projects. So you have Molecule and you have Bio, and you also have the Bio token. Mm-hmm. Can you explain a little further how these entities are related and what the role of the Bio token is?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, you know, Molecule is the protocol layer, right, where we transport all the scientific data. It's also the interface for the scientists, you know, where we provide a lab environment where we also process the data that is being provided to make it, you know, machine readable and so on. And then for BioXYZ, that's really the launch pad, right? Like that's where you know, the patients and people that want to like get down into one specific scientific field can get active. You know, you can also propose new DAOs within the BioXYZ website. And if you check out the website, you'll see that we have a couple of projects that are launching soon. And here we really focus on three different types of products, so to say, right? So initially we started off with purely bio DAOs, yeah? So Hair DAO, Valley DAO, Percepta, Transfidelity, and so on. And then initially also we launched kind of like scientific IPTs, yeah? On Molecule, which we now also moved to Bio. And then the third part that we're launching on Bio is like science agents, which the latest or the first one we actually launched was Aubrey. And maybe tell you a bit more about that later. So what the Bio token really is for, right, is a platform token for this launchpad, right? So it gives you, I mean, the ultimate idea that it becomes kind of the S&P 500 of DeSci. So kind of like to give you full exposure over all the DAOs. And I mean, we always, you know, provide like or support all the DAOs in like their go-to-market and TGE events and so on. And the Bio token, once you buy it, you can lock it up on our platform, and then you get VBio instead, which then gives you a Bio XP. And with that XP, you get prior access basically to new projects launching, and it gives you a higher leverage. And I mean, something that we also recently launched that turned out to be very successful, and shout out to the bio team here, is the yapping logic. Yeah. So like if you talk about bio on Twitter, we're kind of like measuring that. And that's also a way to earn XP. And that got people really engaged. We saw kind of like an explosion of people getting involved to earn XP, and then turn that into early access, into new launches. So like the Aubrey AI launch that we had last week, and then there's a couple of more launches coming in the next couple of weeks.
Interesting to hear that, especially about the social campaign, because so many people on crypto Twitter complain about Kaido and like people talking about projects for XP or token allocations, but all the projects that I have personally talked to so far, which have launched such a campaign, are super happy with the results. So yeah, interesting to see that discrepancy there. So would you say it's kind of just replicating the launch pad meta that we've already seen in last cycle, where you have to lock up a certain amount of a token to just get access to the launch, but just more specifically for the biotech sector? Or like, are there any other like governance or revenue sharing functions of the bio token?
I mean, at the moment, as I said, like revenue sharing is not really an option. Like that's not possible. But the governance is obviously very lively, I would say. I mean, there's a lot of things happening within the bio community as to what to be launched and so on. And I mean, we really want this to become kind of like the router, for the entire DeSci ecosystem. Obviously there's other ways to launch as well. Yeah, but I mean, hopefully we provide enough logic and expertise and like also software applications in that sense that allow to launch, in an environment that gives you the right access to people that care about this kind of stuff. And I mean, coming back to the Aubrey launch last week, like within the first week, we generated, I think, $50,000-$60,000 US in trading fees, like pools that we provided, and that goes directly back into longevity research, right? So the intention here is that I think that's something you need to be signed up for, right? To support science with the crypto activities that you do, and that by like obviously speculating and so on, you always like distribute a fraction of that speculation into the scientific research.
How's the launch process on bio structured right now? Because one criticism or one concern that I would have is that, I mean, I myself am not an expert in biochemics or biology. So how could I filter through the different projects, the different options? How could I assess whether there's any validity to the hypothesis or claim that they are making? Because I would argue that it is very easy to, or very tempting to portray some of these potential solutions or findings in a different light than they actually are. I mean, we've seen that especially in the longevity space. There's been a lot of supplement companies which have been not really on the most honest side of things. So how are you protecting investors against that, and how does the vetting process look like?
Yeah. I mean, protecting the investors, I mean, it is fundamental research, right? And I mean, we don't want to put a scientist in a situation where he's pressured by the token performance into falsifying his scientific results. So we have to be very clear here that, like whatever the scientific outcome is, we might have to realize that some of the research is not going to end up in a positive result, right? But that being said, is that the treasury that's generated or comes into existence, which with each DAO that is launched, you can outlive a particular research project, right? And then they can change direction. And I mean, what you just addressed was like, how do I even, as someone that doesn't come from the biotech space, understand all these projects? That's where we really try to work with these agents, in order to feed kind of like the data into an agent environment that allows you to understand the projects on a kind of like easy level, and you can have it explained to yourself in a way that it's understandable, so you can for yourself decide whether something is relevant and exciting to you. And I mean, that's like in our community analysis, that's something we see, that most people, at the moment, very strictly only invest into one or two tokens or DAOs that they really care about, and don't spread so much out and already develop a portfolio strategy across all the different DAOs and IPTs that we have launched.
Speaking of the hypotheses generation with AI, can you dive a little deeper into Arbor, like how the idea came to be and how it fits into the process of launching on Bio?
Yeah. Well, I would say the overlap of the biohacking and longevity community with the crypto community is pretty big. And that's where it all started initially. And Aubrey de Grey is one of the most well-known researchers in the longevity space. We actually managed to basically get access to his entire lab documentation, so all his personal notes, anything that was ever generated since he's a researcher in the space. And what we did here is basically to feed all that knowledge into the Aubrey AI agent. So now when you talk to Aubrey, basically you can access the entire lab knowledge of Aubrey de Grey. And with the help of the agent, you can generate new hypotheses. And this is also where we connect Aubrey into the molecule protocol, because Aubrey alone, basically, or the people that interacted with Aubrey have generated over 1,000 new hypotheses for longevity that have all been minted as a proof of invention on the molecule protocol layer. And now you can basically filter through all these hypotheses and see what's interesting and could be really tangible, and then basically take it forward, mint it as an IPT, and then start the actual research process to validate the hypothesis.
How does the model work in the backend? Is it just a wrapper of, let's say, GPT-5 or Grok 4 fed by all the research of Dr. Aubrey, or like how is it able to generate better results or like more robust hypotheses than, for example, me just prompting ChatGPT, okay, like generate me XYZ amount of hypotheses based on the research of the leading scientists in that field?
Yeah. No, the model is completely independent, and by all means, I'm not an expert here. Yes, it would be better to have another chat with the Aubrey team here. But we really kind of focused it on the knowledge of Aubrey de Grey. So there's no other context, and it took us quite some months to actually fine tune, the entire setup to make sure that the output makes sense. And I mean, at the moment, it's also not fully open to the public. It's basically just open to researchers in the longevity field to tap into the knowledge of Aubrey de Grey, and like obviously tackle it with already kind of like expertism from their perspective. But that particularly makes it interesting because if you think about in history, like any researcher that wants to research something, they have to go through thousands of pages of research of other scientists, right? And then they read all of this, and then eventually they go take a shower and they wait for the eureka moment of like having that one idea that could change humanity, right? And basically what we try to do here with these agents is that we condense the knowledge of a particular research space into that agent model and make it a lot more accessible. And, because you can, with a simple question, you can skim through the entire research and kind of like align it around your idea or question. And that allows you to generate that hypothesis on the molecule protocol. So we hope, that we can really accelerate the kind of like ideation process within science with that kind of setup.
Interesting to see how AI in that context is used more as a vehicle for accessibility and not necessarily for completely new generation because I mean, if you talk about AI and the difference to other big technological progresses that we've seen in the past, let's say century, like the car getting mainstream, the TV, radio, internet, all of these things, these have all been information distribution vehicles, never been like information creation vehicles. Like it was always about reducing friction, and AI is kind of the first technology that can evolve from like reducing friction to actually creating maybe even something new, or at least being better at combining the almost infinite amount of possibilities of things that are out there. So yeah, interesting to see how it's used as more of the ultimate information accessibility tool here, because obviously you have a ton of very niche and complex knowledge in these fields. Yeah, maybe moving on to a little more of your personal background, like what did get you excited in molecule, and do you have a biotech background from before, and how did you end up in this space?
Yeah, not at all, actually. So, I mean, I joined Molecule at the beginning of this year, and I was working for Laxo before, was a layer one blockchain from Berlin in the creative economy space. And before that, I was building a decentralized social network with my back in the day co-founders, which never got to light because FX went bankrupt, so we couldn't manage the follow-up funding round. But I left Laxo, and Molecule came over basically, or we got in touch. I was immediately amazed by the idea and the possibilities that exist here, to really put the scientific research into the hands of the patients, and all make it more accessible, because biotech is like so, like locked up with all the IP. And also what you mentioned earlier, like when people launch supplements where no one really knows whether they're make sense or not, or it's just some white powder that doesn't do anything, And with decentralized science, we can obviously, eventually have the entire provenance of a scientific development process on chain, right? So from the manufactured supplement, you can kind of like go all the way back to the hypothesis of the scientists of these compounds that have been put into a formulation. And you can, instead of trust, you can verify. And I think that's very core to, like our crypto beliefs. And that's what got me really excited. And I was very happy to get the opportunity to work with Molecule.
Are you planning to expand into scientific infrastructure funding too? Let's say bioreactors or laboratories. For example, a good friend of mine, he's quite interested in launching a bioreactor company. And I told him, like, check out the whole like DeSci and DePIN stuff, because for these very, let's say, exotic funding cases, which are not necessarily a VC case, but rather like a debt finance thing, you might find it easier to raise capital on these permissionless markets, because you have a completely different risk profile and risk appetite here.
Yeah. I think that's I mean, we're not going to do it ourselves, but obviously we want to enable it, right? And I mean, we're already talking to providers that would be very interested to collaborate with the DeSci community to provide, computing power or lab capacity, or even, patient trials. We also see a lot of governments coming to us which are keen to, like provide medical treatments in like special economic zones and stuff like that are keen to collaborate on this. I think, I mean, with Pump Science, we're already doing it, right? Where we are using lab capacity to get compounds tested that otherwise wouldn't. And I think another example that we already launched is QBio, where with the funding that was generated, we allowed them to actually build a laboratory to be even able to experiment within quantum biology. So because that type of lab didn't exist before. And they came up with an idea on how to build this, and it basically got funded through the Bio Launchpad. Yeah.
What would you say are the most prevalent criticisms of DeSci as a whole right now? And can you steelman the success of DeSci? Like, what could happen that could kind of derail the entire industry, and how are you attempting to fix that, especially geared towards like incentive misalignments and like scientific fraud and all of these aspects?
Yeah. I mean, I think a fundamental challenge in crypto that, I mean, and I'm coming myself originally from the kind of like B2B software as a service space, like obviously in crypto, we cannot take back our experiments, right? So, I mean, in order to try out things in the capacity of tokenomics, and in terms of metrics and like bonding curves or like user engagement, token staking and so on. I mean, this is only things that you can really try out in the wild. So you cannot kind of like test them out in a lab environment and see how it develops. You have to do it in the real world market. And that is obviously sometimes very challenging. Yes. And I mean, like anyone is always prone to, make mistakes, and things will eventually maybe not work out as you intended. I think what from all the people that I've met in DeSci, so far, everyone is very like honest and hardworking. I don't think there's a lot of scammers at that point. But obviously, with the success of the DAOs, we also saw a lot of influx, obviously, of project proposals where, like once you do a bit of digging, basically, you can see that people just hope to launch a DAO in order to, generate a treasury and be rich. Rather than really caring about the scientific progression that they intend to achieve with the given topic. And that's obviously something that we need to filter out, right? So, and that's where we're investing also a lot of our time and effort to, to really build a funnel that helps to qualify, what makes sense to be launched at DeSci, because there's a lot of things that are not where you cannot compete, let's say, with big pharma because it's just too expensive. So we have to find the applications and research fields, that are really relevant to DeSci, like as I said, with longevity, for example, there's a natural connection there that allows us to, create new things on the back of these macro trends. Yeah.
On the side of the projects launched and their individual tokens, have you talked to, let's say, some larger token holders of these, and have they shared some thoughts on how they attempt to value them? Like, is it something where people try to model out future cash flows or like the profitability of a certain drug and like figuring out the likelihood of something getting approved or the likelihood of that hypothesis playing out? Or would you say it's right now more valued like a meme coin-ish token, or like how does the market price come to be?
I mean, I can obviously not comment on the intrinsic motivation of individual investors. I mean, we do hope to attract people that care about the science, but obviously we also get people that purely come for the speculation. I mean, we see a lot of people in the like various DAO communities that go very deep on the research that is being done. And like, for example, if you look at DeSci and like all the psychedelics research that they have been supporting, there's a deep care for the topic. And I think in that particular example, it's probably less about the financial outcome, but more about the acceleration or like development of humankind. But clearly there are other projects, where we hope to see more commercial success. And as I mentioned, we are working on a RWA implementation that allows then also to for token holders to participate in this here kind of like, future revenues, let's say. But that's still something that's in development basically, and that we need to figure out and want to figure out. So it's a mix of both, really.
Very nice. Which of the projects that are about to launch that you can maybe tease on bio are exciting right now, and what are your guys' plans for the future, let's say on a 1 to 2 year time horizon?
That's a very interesting question. I mean, what I'm excited about is one thing is Dig Down, which is about men's health and libido, where they're going to launch quite soon with a couple of very interesting initiatives.
That certainly has a lot of product market fit with the broader cryptocurrency community, I guess.
It might, exactly. I mean, don't tell that to Athena DAO, the female health DAO that we already launched quite some time ago, right? Which is a very overlooked scientific research field, but yeah, this is particularly one that I really like. There's also something in dermatology that we're looking at. That's in the funnel that's going to be launched, where we hope to also have a product available in the market very quickly. So yeah, there's a lot of things cooking in that regards, and obviously with all these new projects being launched, we're obviously also working always on the further development of the protocol in order to kind of like really build a robust and a scalable system that unlocks more and more composability across all these different assets, from like patient data over like drug formulations, over hypothesis, and like lab data from pump science. I mean, even all the lab data that pump science is currently generating is flowing into the molecule protocol, right? It becomes available there. And in future, at some point, hopefully, all of this is somewhat growing together, and it becomes starts to collaborate on a more kind of like artifact to artifact level. And then what we're hoping to see eventually is a so-called Cambrian explosion, where a lot of things suddenly start to collaborate that no one ever thought to happen before, and that would then really push science forward in a very novel way that humanity hasn't seen really.
Definitely excited for that. I mean, my own academic career has been rather brief. I just did a bachelor, and that's, I mean, in economics and finance, so it's like not the most thoroughly interesting academic field, but I had a little bit of a glimpse into it, and I would wholeheartedly agree that there is a lot of mechanisms and incentive misalignments to be improved upon, and I think that molecule and bio are doing good work on that field, and I'm certainly interested how that experiment is going to play out. So yeah, coming towards the end of the show, Ivo, is there any other topics you'd like to touch on, or anything else you'd like the audience to know?
Well, I mean, dig in. I mean, like I've also been new to the biotech space when I joined Molecule, and I had a very steep learning curve as to how all of this works, and how traditional biotech is basically, or like life science research is happening. I think across all the DAOs that we have launched, there's so much to discover, and people can just really follow their personal interests, and get involved in the communities and invest into the tokens that you care about, and get involved with the research. I mean, last week, for example, we launched a token, Prima Donna, with university in the US, and it's really exciting because basically what they're intending to do is to regrow teeth NML, right? So basically to regrow your teeth that over the years, get more and more used. And I mean, like what I really like about the DeSci space is these practical implications, what we are funding. Because imagine like that research is actually successful, and eventually people don't have to get replacement teeth anymore, but they can just regrow the teeth they already have, right? And I mean, if you look across all the projects that we have funded, there's so much stuff that's like really exciting, and that can really have an impact. And DeSci will also make that a lot more accessible to people where it doesn't get locked up in big pharma. And it's hopefully will end up to be a lot more democratic than it used to be.
Being someone who has lost a couple of teeth in an accident, I certainly hope that project will succeed. So maybe I can get rid of some downstream consequences there.
Exactly. You should go and buy some Prima Donna IPTs.
Probably. It was great having you on, Ivo. Is there any links you'd like the audience to know about? Where should they check out Molecule and Bio, and where can they learn more? And we'll make sure to link all of that in the podcast description later, of course.
Exactly. So, I mean, for everything Molecule, check out Molecule XYZ. That's where you'll find all our IPTs, so like the actual scientific research projects that got funded. And then for all the DAOs and the DAO Launchpad and also the agent Launchpad, obviously check out Bio XYZ. And last but not least, obviously pump.science, where you can kind of like watch live streams of mice and worms and flies being fed with various number of compounds. And you can always see which of the compounds that have been launched so far is currently the king of the pills, and is basically provided the longest life extendance to the given test group, basically. So yeah, it's just a really great space to explore, and I mean, there's obviously other DCI projects that that are also fantastic. So yeah, I can just really recommend to hop into the wormhole and explore. Yeah.
Cool. Let's hope that the pump.science streams don't spiral out in a similar fashion as the pump fun streams did a couple of months ago before they had to shut them down. I mean, there's with all the like science and experimental substances area, there's like ample opportunity to do something weird on there, I guess. But yeah, let's see how the space develops.
We're definitely starting to see that, and I mean, permissionlessness is something that we deeply care about, and that we always discuss pretty much every week within the team, and like how to make that more and more happen. But I mean, we're also talking about supplements and medicine and so on. So there is a certain limitation, also from a government control point of view, where you obviously have to do some kind of moderation. So yeah, that's definitely a challenge that hopefully is ahead of us. But I call it always a luxury problem, because that means we have a lot of attention and scale, and then that's hopefully a good problem to have.
Very nice, Ivo. Thanks a lot for coming on. I think these were a lot of unique insights there, and kind of cool to see people still building in the DeSci sector, even though this niche has fallen back a little bit in terms of attention. I personally hope it will come back, because like it's a cool application of kind of crypto incentive alignment, and probably more productive use of capital than buying meme coins and engaging in all the other Ponzi games accessible to our industry right now. So
absolutely. I mean, we're really doing our best to put it on the map. I mean, CZ spoke about DeSci again last week. We are across the board, like plentiful conferences, both in the crypto and the biotech space, to promote the topic. And I mean, we see a lot of curiosity and interest, but obviously, like merging these two spaces together will still mean a lot of work for us at the DeSci community.
Yeah, I mean, having the three some of the most important people in crypto, I think like Brian Armstrong, he launched that research coin thing. Then Vitalik and CZ, they were at a DeSci event. So I think you have quite a bit of buy-in from powerful people in the industry. So yeah, I guess it's a bright time ahead for Molecule and DeSci as a whole.
And I mean, financially, we're talking about a multi-trillion-dollar market, and after moving banking onto the chain, I think the science is just the next natural thing where it makes a lot of sense to put that onto crypto rails.
100% agree. It was great having you on. Thanks a lot for sharing all your takes, and yeah, maybe let's jump in for a round two, maybe for a little debate with some of the critics of DeSci, or if you guys have some project that you'd like to showcase, which is either about to launch or has is on the brink on some world-changing discovery.
Perfect. Let's do that.
Have a good one, Ivo.
You too. Thanks. Bye.